Hello, everyone, and welcome to another War Table Star Wars. What is?
You started laughing, and I started laughing.
You started laughing first.
Clearly,
Lies.
day 3. I don't even know what you're laughing about. We are here and ready to go with the character balance and creation panel for Star Wars Shatterpoint. So we're going to be spending some time talking about how we select characters for Star Wars Shatterpoint, how we go about the initial designs, the playtesting process, the refinement process. We're going to be talking just in general all about the design and dev philosophy of how these characters come together. And then at the end, we're probably going to take a look at some things that are up and coming and talk a little bit about their journeys and how these topics that we're going to talk about apply to them. So if you're looking for sweet spoilers, there might be a few at the end of this.
That means you have to hang out.
Or come back and like...
No, don't tell them that. They have to hang out.
Well, they don't know how... I don't know how long it's going to take us to get through this.
That's why they have to hang out.
I see. Fair enough. You would want to be here anyway, because we're going to talk about some really interesting stuff, I think. So how do we start with characters, right? I'm not doing introductions. It's day 3. If you've missed it, you've missed it, and we have little lower thirds. I'm moving on. I want to get to the stuff at the end.
All right.
Don't judge me, Plumber. I don't like it. Stop it.
I'm just waiting for you to start.
You could start.
I could start.
How do the
I'd rather
characters
not.
start?
How do characters start? Like when I do them?
No. Shake starts with them. That's how characters start.
I thought
that-
you didn't
that
get
is
riled
true.
anymore. You feel it right now.
I'm not super riled.
Feel it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Intros, please. I am Will Pagani, Development Manager. This
Oh.
is Michael Q. Plummer.
Lead developer on Star Wars Shatterpoint.
Yeah,
Michael
that's the
Q.
one.
Plummer?
It changes
I
every
still
It changes every
I
day.
still like Michael J.
Michael J. Yeah. It has a good ring to it. It flows
does.
very
It
well.
flows right off.
So there you go, chat. Now you have introductions. This is Shilwick.
Chill Smick.
Sure.
Yeah. So the first start of everything, where we begin, is with a plan. We have a traditional 5-year plan. Because our production process and our development process, it takes approximately 2 years or more to create just a single product. We have to be looking not only in 2 years, but further than that. So we kind of developed this 5-year outlook. We're looking at, in terms of Shatterpoint, we're looking at do the squads that we're releasing, do they have things that will merge well with them? What eras are we looking at? If we're introducing a new era, is it just like kind of a one-off shot with just one squad or 2 squads, or are we going to flesh things out? We try to get an idea of the different tags that are going to go into those things so that we can start building synergies and kind of a roadmap that keeps things interesting and fresh and exciting. But in the end, because of how the production process works and the fact that 5 years out is still very far out, we want to be adaptive to Star Wars and where it's going in the galaxy and how things work. So we do have... Don't glare at me, Anne. I saw that. This judgment will not stand. So we do have flexibility within that schedule where, typically the 5-year plan isn't always whatever's in year 5 will shift and mutate as we move along and we kind of determine and learn stuff. Or if new information comes out that we think would be exciting to capitalize on and it works within that schedule, we'll do that as well. One of the big differences from Shatterpoint to kind of the Star Wars Legion look, where we have to be much more regimented in that plan because we're trying to work within factions, is the fact that Shatterpoint has so much flexibility when it comes to strike team creation. So we can go into different eras. We can just touch very briefly within like a timeline of the Star Wars universe. We can do a New Republic thing once. We can do a dual pack with Vader and Obi-Wan from the Obi-Wan show, despite the fact that there may not be a lot to support that within the line for a little bit because you're missing kind of those eras. And as long as there's enough there to build a squad with, it still works within the game. So in that way, we just have a lot more creativity and the ability to dive into different things that in a game like Legion or other things like it doesn't work, right? You can't just be like, here's a unit of
Well, yeah, you can't just
Gungans.
make like, here's Ewoks.
That's a bad one.
Here's
Here's
an Ewok.
Ewoks.
Here's
Sure.
one Ewok.
One Ewok.
And you're like, great.
Single
what am I going to do
Ewok.
with the Ewok?
Um,
right? That's not helpful. You need the whole set, right?
If you're looking at, or like, if you're looking at, say, you're going into High Republic or New Republic and you want to make those things into their own specific factions,
Yeah,
it's
you got
going
to
to
do the whole thing.
takes a whole
Right.
number of releases.
Yep.
And then you have to think about how you're going to support that and do that. Shatterpoint is free of those bounds, which means that it's a bit more scattershot. because there's a lot more player choice to it. It doesn't tell the narrative quite as strongly as Legion does, but it does allow us to bounce around. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're entrusted as stewards of the Star Wars galaxy and its IP and its story. So we always have to walk a very straight and narrow line of respecting the canon, while creating a game environment that is interesting in a sandbox of player choice. So that also comes into like who we're choosing and where. That's a conversation with our partners at LFL and everything else. Mr. Plummer.
Yeah.
Let's talk, now that we have the plan, we've determined who our characters are. Let's talk a little bit about how initial character design goes about. So we've picked our character. We have to start making rules for him. What do we do?
Well, it goes one of two ways. Sometimes I just get a document from Mr. Schick here that says, this is what I think the character does, make it work. And occasionally, I'm afforded the opportunity to come up with that myself. And when I do
we've
that...
had Will Pagani do it.
Will Pagani's done it as well, of course.
We've had a number of people, like if you have strong feelings about the character, you'll get to do it.
Absolutely.
But I think the one thing I want to point out with the initial design doc, right, is we do our best to write the game rules as we think they are.
Yes.
So it does look like a stat card in disguise, I guess, or like.
Yeah, it's the shell of a stance card, but some parts are falling off. Like some of the language is wrong and it needs to be cleaned up. Like if you played it as is, it wouldn't work. But that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter at that stage. Right?
But it really starts from theme. Like the whole thing is around what does this character feel like when I watch the show? What are they doing? When I, think of Ahsoka Tano, who is Ahsoka Tano at this moment in this snapshot? Like what part are we doing? I'll watch a movie. I'll watch a supercut of clips. Sometimes I just go online and read a bunch of quotes from the character and try and figure out like what are those moments that are most key to getting this character correct, and then how does that translate into game rules? And then from there we have to ask, is this useful? Does this do anything? Like we talked about yesterday, like is this character quote unquote good? Not are they powerful, but like does this do anything? Is this worth playing?
We had a lot of discussions yesterday about that. If you missed that panel, you should definitely go back and watch that one.
Totally.
To learn about Shatterpoint characters.
But yeah, I mean, it really is like it's a best guess, right? You're like, you try to make the character as you envision it playing on the tabletop based on all the research that you do. And then you're like, I think all this works.
Yes.
Right? And that's kind of the big part of the design. The other thing that we always have to determine at this point, we talk about snapshots of the characters. And I know that there's been discussion online about like, okay, well, so some characters, they kind of like cross a lot of eras now, or they seem to be a wider bent, whereas other characters are very narrowly focused. The general rule of thumb that we often apply to that is you look at the character and you say, okay, does this character have a meaningful character arc? Do they change in ways that are impactful and make these snapshots work? Or are they kind of like a straight through line, right? And if a character doesn't really change, like for example, a Grand Inquisitor is a really good one. From everything we've seen in the media, from the Rise of the Empire kind of segment to the Galactic Civil War segment in Rebels, he's pretty much level. He has his moment at the very end of the Rebels season where he develops and then he goes away forever.
Yep.
R.I.P. Pouring out for the homie. But there you go. Yeah, I like how you chose my drink to do that with, not yours.
I don't know where mine is right now.
It's just gone to the wind. So in that case, we have the discussion: is this a character that we think has meaningful differences that we want to explore, that would be interesting to explore? If not, we move on. But if you're a character like Ahsoka, you look at that character and you say, this character has very specific snapshots where they're different and they're filling different roles within kind of the pantheon of the characters of Star Wars and its narrative. And at that point, you're like, okay, well, we're not gonna bucket ourselves in.
Right.
And there obviously, as the story evolves and stuff, there may be times where we get caught out and it's like, oh, this character is different. They do different things.
And what's interesting when you hit that point is to decide, in this snapshot, this moment that we're trying to capture, is this a character that hits hard? Are they a support character? Do they move a lot? Like, what is it that makes the character unique and identifiable, not just through seeing the miniature, but through their action and how they play on the table? It's very important to me as a developer that when you put a miniature down on the table, that it plays the way that you would expect the character to act in the show or the movie.
And I think the the other marker for me is like whenever you're naming the abilities, if you're having fun with the names of the abilities, it's usually a good sign. Like you're just like when you run through a card and you read it and you're just like, yes, I would say this out loud every time I used it, or you know, it brings a little smile to your face as you read those little snapshots. It's a good for me. It's a good marker of like, okay, I think we're really hitting the theme here because I'm connecting, I'm resonating with the rules that I'm reading on the cards, and that's always really important. Anything you'd like to add, Mr. Pagani?
I'm really just here to move around all of the things on the stance trees and make little pictures with them.
That's true. That's true. The
fair.
stance charts are pretty fun since you get to like create all these weird branching paths and have them be meaningful and different, or just create pictures with them.
But yes, more seriously, the stance cards to me are always the most exciting part of characters. Like I think
For sure.
the special rules are super cool, but y'all usually nail those. For me, it's more about the stance cards and consistency of dice and things like that, and expertise charts, and where I'm working with all those type things. So that's where I spend a lot of my time when we're working on characters and things like that.
The math
is in that portion of them.
That's a good segue into the next part. So once the sketch is laid out, the design is done either way, and we kind of pass it back and forth between the three of us. It then goes on to a larger dev and design review. So the entire development department takes a look at it, and we start discussing, getting fresh eyes on it, getting different takes from the other developers and their kind of point of view of, well, in my experience of this game, like this is abusable, you know, and everybody has their own kind of like things they key in on. So talk a little bit about how that process goes, what feedback we're looking for, what feedback we're gonna move into, and then how internal testing is kind of handled.
Yeah, so everything gets posted into a dev review channel that we have in our internal chat program, and everybody takes a look at the card, makes their comments, and then from there, it usually has a pretty small shift. I'll take a look at that feedback from everyone on the team and see where it applies and how it applies and what things should move around. Like, should these numbers be a little higher? Should they maybe do a little more damage, like right out of the gate? Try and catch the things that we know are identifiable problems from our experiences playing the game, but try not to change it too much because we haven't played it yet, and you really can't know until it's on the table. And a lot of the times, even, you know, we'll see I think this is going to be a problem, and the answer is to wait and make sure it's a problem. Like, play the game. Really try and get a playtest schedule with it like as soon as possible, as fresh as it is, fixing major problems, and then just get it on the table and see what it does. And then that first feedback section, whenever we play something new for the first time, is always the most heated. Because it's either someone screaming about how awesome it was and it felt right, which is great, but it barely happens. And then there's
when you get that one, you take it.
Yeah, and there's always the one where someone's like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like so and so. And at that point, that's when it's really a question of like, okay, why? You know, we're gonna ask for that feedback specifically. Like, what is it specifically that doesn't feel right? Either what's missing or what doesn't feel like it hits on the head. And sometimes the answer from there is to just go look up some more quotes and let that guide me. Like, personally, one of my favorite things to do is just find a cool quote from the character and then figure out what that can apply to in game terms. Especially because there are 4 conditions. There's damage. There are the moves. There are enough things that you can do in the game, but it's not like an endless cavalcade of options. So trying to craft something that is unique to the character, that is going to push them more towards that satisfying mouthfeel, right? Like, it's the character. I had to bring it back. It's been a couple years.
It's been a while since the mouthfeel infiltrated the mini extravaganza.
But like the initial internal test, I think, is less about the number balance and getting everything right on the head, because the truth is, like, we're never going to get to play enough games to get that right with the people in the office. It's more about getting the overall feel of the character correct so that when we give it to external playtesters, it already feels right, and then we can focus on the more granular pieces.
I think that internal testing also is a moment for us to really dial in. Like, again, you're making your best guess. You're like, I want the character to do this. I think these ideas lead to that. And then that internal testing, like you said, it really comes back to, okay, this character isn't performing well on the tabletop, or these abilities aren't doing X, Y, or Z, or they don't feel impactful. And then the debate or the discussion becomes, okay, but the reason that they're there is because of this. Like, we want Darth Vader to feel powerful and like he has this inexorable advance and he just is scary, right? He's marching down the hallway and he's going to come get you. That's why these things are here. And then the argument is, well, but they're either not doing that or they're doing it too well and they're stifling this. So
Yes.
how do we maintain that theme? It always comes back, like you said, to that core focus of theme, which is determined in that design point, and then you work around that to figure out, okay, how are we going to make that? And that's where I think you get a lot of subjectivity and a lot of questions. But once we have that, we can move on to external testing, confident in the fact that we have our direction really nailed down. And sometimes we do change the design of a character based on those conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
From a theme standpoint, it's like, well, I know that they do this, but I think it would be better if we focused on this aspect of their character or that aspect.
And I think sometimes, right, we're like, we really want this character to do this. And I'm like, cool. That's just not good.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not good, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're like, that's very cool, and that is definitely something that the character does, but the game doesn't need that, right? Like, that's not helpful to anyone. Or that's like, oh, good golly, that is too much. Right? Like, it really goes both directions.
Yeah.
And I think Darth Vader is a great example where we're like, he's got to do it all. And we're like,
Yeah.
He can't do it all. That doesn't work.
Darth Vader can be one of
So-
the hardest characters to do because, like, you think of Darth Vader and it's just like, oh, like everything you
Yeah.
think of Darth Vader, right? But when you make that and put it on the table, the other person on the other side of the table kind of goes, oh, that's not fun to play against.
Yeah, it's sort of like, how do you make the most powerful being in Star Wars be interesting and fun and
For
exciting?
both players.
For both play. Like, look, it's almost more important that your opponent has a good time than it is if you have a good time, because if your opponent's not having a good time, you won't get any more games, right?
Correct.
And we've done 2 Darth Vaders now. There was no question mark there. 2 Darth Vaders now, and they're very exciting, and they're very different. And
We're
they're
probably going to
get,
even look at those two in tandem.
That's true, in just a little bit. So
just
I
a
will
little bit.
stop talking about Darth Vaders now, and we will talk about that.
Terrible example.
If you keep talking about Darth Vader, we might not get to the Darth Vader.
Terrible
That's true.
examples.
Well, I mean, it's a great example, but we're just doing it more later. Should we do it now?
No, we should not do it now. We
Ann
have
was
more
ready.
stuff to talk about.
Anne's ready.
No, Ann. No. Bad Ann.
Not yet.
Don't push that button. Bring it down. Because I want to continue on so that as I want to put all of the pieces in place of the process and the journey, so that as we talk about these characters, we can reference back.
Yeah.
But we're almost there. You just have like a
get
couple
excited.
minutes. You have a couple minutes to
I get
wait.
excited.
So once we're happy internally, it then goes to external playtesting. This is the bulk of the miniatures journey, the characters journey, the units journey, where they're going to get a lot of tweaks. Sometimes they're big tweaks, sometimes they're small tweaks. There's going to be a lot of debate and discussion. There's going to be a lot of differences of opinions, and they're not all going to get rectified by the end of it.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that process in general, good testing, what you're looking for, what's helpful, what's not, all that good stuff.
External playtesting is a completely different beast from internal playtesting. So where I said in internal playtesting we have very few tweaks, in external playtesting it kind of goes off the rails to a certain extent as far as like things staying consistent. We give all of the new stuff to the testers. We tell them like, this is what we're testing. If there's any parameters that we have, like these have these tags, try them with these other characters. Make sure there's nothing broken there. We'd like you to play this with X, Y, and Z against PD and Q, whatever. And then we just kind of set them loose to play some games. And then the reports start to roll in. And that's when we start really learning things. Because people who have no skin in the game of the design, who don't care about me, Michael Plummer, get to tell me what they think of the work that we're doing, as opposed to my friends here in the dev office who are trying to be gentle. And we find out very quickly like what is and is not working from the mechanical standpoint, and then we have the discussions internally of like, how do we fix this, right? Like, here's what the testers are saying, here's what's happening, here are the game reports, and here's the example of what's happening. What do we do here? And then it's either we change numbers, we change the wording, we change the entire effect, we cut this ability, whatever it is, and we update those cards every week. Every single week, we go in and we change what the characters do.
Sometimes more than once a week.
Sometimes more than once a week. And at the beginning of that process, sometimes entire cards change. Like 1 week, this guy has these 4 abilities, and then next week, 2 of them are gone, replaced with something new. And the week after that, this one that was there originally is back, and this one's gone. And you really can't, it's very hard to keep track of the journey. Like you look at a card from day 1, and then you look at what actually ships, and sometimes it is just not even in the same realm, and other times we basically could have printed it day 1 if we like moved a couple commas. It's a really, really in-depth like journey and process, And what we're really looking for from external playtesters is, one, hot takes, because those are super important. That's what everyone's going to feel the first time that they put something on the table. We always want them to like play a game with it. There's so much that you can theory craft about, and you can talk about, this looks great and this pairs up with X, Y, and Z. But until you actually play it in the game and can give like concrete examples of what has happened, best case, worst case, it's kind of meaningless. So we need to see like actual gameplay. And really, like, in a playtest report, what I'm looking for is, a lot of the times I'll get a playtest report and it's like super in depth about every single thing that happened in the game, every activation, like where I moved, what objective, this, that, and the other. And then not much about like the individual units. And for me, what I'm really looking for from playtesters is proof you played the game, but I don't need like every detail of where you moved. Yeah, like if something crazy happens, give me the blow by blow. But really just an overall assessment of the character, how they fit into their, we don't have factions, but like their canon
role,
groups.
Their
role, their spot
place within the galaxy,
canonically and in gameplay. What's interesting, what's boring, what feels like it falls flat, what feels like it's going to be amazing but isn't. That's a big one. A lot of people, like, they're like, I thought this was going to be great, and then in my game it just kind of, and that never feels good. So those are things that we want to fix. And really, just anything that is either extremely gratifying about playing the character, so that we can try and hone in on like, that's the thing that this does well, and then of course just things that don't work. The thing that I really don't like reading, but also love reading, is, this is fine, it seems to work.
It seems to work.
Like, I love reading that at the end of the playtest cycle.
No,
but not
in
the
beginning.
beginning.
Man, you read that at the beginning of the playtest cycle, I get scared.
Like, all right, we'll just keep playing with it. Pagani, I want you to talk a bit about, because you've been doing this for a long time, and obviously you've kind of been the leader and the mentor of all of the devs in this process. But talk about how you distill hot takes, you distill playtest feedback. Like, we always discuss, and you mentioned, like, we get all this feedback back, we make all these changes, but we don't make changes without discussing it, without trying to identify the problem. I want you to talk about how the process or the skill of the development team is to go through opinion and subjective feedback and identify the actual core issues.
Yeah. What I will say is that in a lot of feedback in general, and this is, I think, for everything, this isn't just game design, whenever you're receiving feedback on something, what you're getting is how the person feels, right? And they're going to be like, oh, well, this is how I feel, and this is what I think that means. And that might be correct, right? They may say, like, I didn't enjoy playing Asajj Ventress because of X, Y, Z, or whatever. And then they'll keep harping on one specific thing. I know we got a lot of feedback about Force Push, right? Everybody's like, Force Push just isn't very good, like all this kind of stuff, and I never use it, and it costs too much force, and all this kind of stuff. And this is one of the things that evolved from that, is the like active icon in the combat tree. But is where I'm ending in this, right? And the feedback was like, well, maybe it should cost 1, maybe it should be better, maybe it should do this, maybe it should do that. But really, Force Push is fine if you give them a way to use it that solves their problems. So you have to take what they said and sort of figure out what they're actually saying, which is, hey, I need a more consistent and more usable way to have Force Push happen. And then as the developer, you're like, okay, cool, how do we solve that problem? So whereas they were saying, hey, Force Push is no good, take it off, the actual answer was, if I can use it for free after I attack, it's great. And I love it, and it's very thematic, and it's very fitting, right? So you have to take what they said, sort of identify what the actual complaint is, and then come up with a solution for that complaint. And a lot of the times the complaint will not be in what they said, right? And it's not because they're trying to hide it from you or anything like that. It's just they haven't like honed in on it,
and
right?
Force Push is a really interesting one, just specifically because I remember that one, and we tried it at One Force, and that was not okay.
No, it was
just absolutely
crazy,
not okay.
Crazy.
But it did need to have a cost, and that cost became action economy. And opportunity. Like, you have to get a good attack through, not just attack. So trying to find out, I think generally speaking, in good game design, like, most things have a cost. And what that cost is may vary. It may be the resource of the game. Sometimes it's opportunity. Sometimes it's just the fact that this isn't useful very often, but when it is, it's really good.
Absolutely.
And trying to fit that in and figure out what is an appropriate cost that is going to not hurt to spend, but not feel free.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like I remember the one force push cost.
Yeah.
I remember
was a
those
thing.
days.
So
They
many,
were,
so many letters.
There were people flying everywhere.
It was a rough couple
Well,
days.
and I think that one's kind of interesting too because, and then I think this goes back to kind of the discussion that I was looking for from you is that every different play group has their own meta. And playtest group has
especially
their
true
own
for
meta.
playtest, right?
Yes. And they value different things at different levels.
Definitely.
Some playtest groups will immediately hone in on this squad has so many movement abilities that trigger so often. It is the best thing in the game because they have determined in their meta that movement abilities are how you win the game. Another playtest group will be like, if you don't deal enough damage, you're not worth it to me, and therefore anyone who's light on damage in these ways that we believe is good is that. You get like the force push example where internally we were like, this ability is crazy. It pushes you 6 inches away. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yep.
And you just profit. And so we're like, this is crazy good. The playtest feedback comes in and they're like, Asajj Ventress isn't very good. We've identified these reasons. Also, force push seems bad. And at that point, you read it and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because like by the numbers, it's super good. And then it becomes that skill of identifying why do they not see the value in this thing when we can see the value in this thing? Are we over prioritizing it? Are we not? And all of that
And
stuff.
I think another huge part of this skill is also, do they see something I don't see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how, like, so you have to challenge your own thoughts and ideas constantly in playtest. Like, this is what I believe, and this is what I have seen in my playtest games. Is that right? Like, there's so many times in development meetings and stuff when we're discussing this stuff, and we're just like, am I the one not seeing this? Like, am I being silly? Who's the silly one?
And that's
here?
when we go and we put it on the table and we
Yeah,
try it out,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we try to figure that out.
And we try to replicate the situation that the playtesters are getting, and see like, oh, okay, now I understand what they're trying to say. Now this is the situation they're talking about that I wasn't really grasping before, and that kind of stuff. So there's this really big mental aspect of receiving playtest feedback that is significantly more than just like Asajj good, Asajj bad, right? Like,
and the dramatic like dichotomy of feedback to where one group is like, this character is not okay, it is completely broken, and all these things need to change, and then you get the other 4 playtest groups that are like, seems good.
Yeah.
Ship it.
No issues, ship it, fine. And you're like, which one's right?
And I think
and it's not always the 4, and sometimes it's the 1.
I think it's also like just I've been doing this for a few years now, and one of the skills that I have grown, and I think it's been the hardest for me to grow, but also one of the most important, and it's a piece of writing advice that I always remember, is you have to be willing to kill your darlings. Like sometimes you put something on a character and you think it's the coolest thing in the world, and it is not the coolest thing in the world, and you cannot be convinced of that, but you, as a developer, you need to be willing to say no to yourself and say this doesn't have to be on there. It needs to be good for the game.
That's when you put it in the wings and you bring it back later. You're like, I'll give it 2 years, and they'll come around.
Yeah.
Then sometimes that doesn't work. It goes away again, but it always comes back.
Yeah, it's still there.
Like, remember that thing we tried that nobody liked? I think now's the time.
Yeah.
Now's its moment.
Now I'm just thinking of all of those that exist. And like,
I know, right?
Yeah. I think we're
Sometimes
full
they
of them.
cross games. Sometimes you're like, it wasn't right for this game, but what if we did it here?
Yeah, what if we do it here?
true.
And that's
definitely
one of the
true.
joys of being in a collaborative environment where you have, the entire dev team is looking at everything, not leading the development, but providing feedback and insight.
Yes.
Because a Shatterpoint problem can often be solved by a new take from a Legion solution.
100%.
And I think that makes all the games stronger. It makes everyone think about things in different ways, and it allows everyone internally to challenge appropriately thoughts and expectations, and to keep pushing the
Absolutely.
games forward in a good way. All right, let's jump in to some examples.
Great.
We're gonna start with your boy,
not Darth Vader.
Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker.
Jedi
no,
Knight.
not your boy.
Luke
Not my
Skywalker.
boy. His boy.
So Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker is one of the characters that I was lucky enough to do the initial design on, and this one here.
So we'll start with the journey.
Yeah.
So we picked the fact that it was going to be Return of the Jedi. Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, and when I heard Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker, I immediately all I could think about is Vader and Luke fighting in front of the Emperor.
And then
to
I
me,
told you
that's Return of the Jedi.
that the squad was going to be Jabba's palace.
Yeah, and then you said Jabba's palace, and I said, oh. And I knew that I wanted to have bits of the Vader-Luke duel because you have to. It's Return of the Jedi.
And the discussion was, the squad is based around the Jabba's of the Palace, but we also said we're not going to do 2 versions of Luke from the same movie, so you're good to
get
go.
it all in there.
But remember that the squad itself, this theme.
And this is back to that snapshot, right?
Yep.
Yes.
We know we're not doing another one here. We got to hit the beats here.
So I went and I watched the Jabba's Palace scene, and I was like, what does Luke do in Jabba's Palace that is key? And the quote that hit me is, you can either profit by this or be destroyed. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to write that down. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I was like, this has to do something. And then I went through and started to I think I had a discussion with you about the Force value on Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
And we were pretty much like, he's a 4. 100% he's a 4. And I came back a couple days later and I was like, but what if he was a 3 and he refreshed every turn? And the reason for this was just that I didn't feel like Luke Skywalker should ever not have a Force. Like when Luke goes, there should be Force in the pool, 100%. Sure. And you still get 4 Force from him. You can get 5 now if you Shatterpoint him. And what is the difference between a 3 that always refreshes and just having a 4? And we started to play with that.
I also really like that idea tied with the Return of the Jedi. We got to mention the movie, right? The idea that when Luke shows up, important things are happening. And he shows up in the game, in the abstraction of the game through his activations. But the feeling that, okay, the Force is really paying attention to this event. Oh, Luke Skywalker is showing up. Now the Force has extra attention on this event, right? And I think that was a very cool way to kind of show his importance to events when he arrives. Like, no matter what's happening, when Luke Skywalker walks into that room, it's like everyone's paying attention.
And with the name Return of the Jedi, we all know who Luke's father is. So I looked at the Anakin Skywalker card. I know, spoilers. But Anakin has a jump, so Return of the Jedi is going to make Luke jump. That was easy. We threw deflect on there because, like we talked about yesterday, that was kind of the light side defense thing. Is the deflect great? And at that point, I Will Not Fight You did not exist, and we got to the identity. And the identity it's kind of a greedy identity. It doesn't do much for Luke's buds. But in my mind,
well, I mean, to be fair, he's not around people when he says this, right? There's half of his card that's kind of like Jabba's palace, and then there's the other half that's he's fighting Vader.
Yeah.
And even from the sculpting standpoint, which we've talked about, right? Like the idea was you could take Vader and you could take Luke and you could put them next to each other. We did the alternate torso for Luke so that he's in the appropriate garb when they're in the throne room. So I think it worked out fine, right? Like,
and
all of this was still on theme.
And the name of his identity had to be, I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Sure, of course. I get misty-eyed when you say it, just to me.
So my idea here was, like, Luke helps his friends not by, like, helping his buddies. He's not, like, helping them get on the speeder bike. He is taking care of business, and that's how he helps his buds. So that's where the identity came from, and I think this is actually where it started. It has been this from the beginning, and it just rolls.
Very, very close.
Yeah, but you can
I tell the story on I Will Not Fight You? Because this is my favorite.
Yeah, go for it.
So you mentioned I Will Not Fight You was not part of his original kit. That ability came out when you and I were playing Vader versus Luke, the Vader Emperor's Servant, who we're going to look at here in a second. And we were playing through the game, and we were discussing different things. And I was like, he should be able to just jump away. Like, we had this moment where it was like, if he jumps away onto this gantry after getting attacked, it's going to feel... I was like, that's the movie!
Yes, correct.
And I started...
You started yelling that at me.
Yes, I was so excited. There was this perfect gantry, like, right there. And I was attacking, and I was just like, man... And you were like, I wish I could jump away. I was like, why can't you? Like, he should jump away. He needs to get on that gantry.
Now,
and so then from there, we hit this like whole idea of I will not fight you. Like the fact that Luke, well, he can take care of business.
Yeah.
His journey to become the greatest Jedi is the fact that he realizes that you're not supposed to fight, right? Like that not fighting is stronger than fighting. So I love where that turned out.
And I know we're running out of time to talk about Luke, but you can either profit by this or destroy. It used to be like twice as long, and we finally figured out how to like cut that wording down and still make it do what we wanted it to do.
Which gave us room
to fit I Will Not Fight You. And when you see the next Vader card, if you compare I Will Not Fight You, there's a rule on Vader's card that I'm sure Schick will call out, and if you go back and look at General Obi-Wan Kenobi and look at Patience, you'll note that they're all written in the same way with different effects. They have like the same trigger, the same language, but they all do something that's unique to that character. But it ties together that Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker both learned from General Obi-Wan Kenobi and put their own spin on his tactics and the way that he fights.
All right, so let's go next. Let's go to Darth Vader. This one's interesting because now we're going to get to kind of talk about that snapshot part. So obviously, we start the process with the design. We know that we're doing Darth Vader from Empire Strikes Back, or not from Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. And we're mostly looking at like the throne room scene, especially for Vader, because that's when he does the most stuff. So what does that look like? And I had the job of trying to make sure that each Vader felt different. So we have the Jedi Hunter Vader, he's very active. He's looking to just go do straight murder, and he focuses a lot on dealing lots of damage and boosting his combat prowess and everything. Very aggressive. I didn't want to lose the aggression from the new Vader Emperor Servant, but we wanted to represent it in kind of a different way. And so, we went back to, it was funny because we wound up with You Don't Know the Power of the Dark Side being very similar to Luke Skywalker's Return of the Jedi, where they both refresh Force. So when they're there, this is the climactic moment. It's very important. We got to that point from the You Cannot Hide Forever. So You Cannot Hide Forever and You Are Unwise to Lower His Defenses went through a journey.
They did.
The original design idea for him was that Vader would get to attack potentially twice within his activation. And
go back to Anakin.
And to go back to Anakin, but it would be his identity, and he would kind of push forward with the idea that if you wound up around him, he would punish you for not fighting him back, right? To play back into that idea that Luke wants to talk it out, and he wants to just finish it. There were so many versions of this character, and everything kind of moved around. Everything on the card was always kind of there.
Yeah.
But where we wound up was it's crazy.
Crazy.
But it's an interesting both strength and weakness of this version of Vader.
Yeah.
So You Cannot Hide Forever. Whenever he doesn't wound a unit on his activation, he gets shuffled back into the deck.
Yeah.
Which is nutso. So he can just go forever.
Correct.
Which is not always a good
Which
thing.
is not always a good thing. So at first it was like, is this too powerful? Through playing it, it was like, not really, because even though Vader's not wounding everybody every time he goes again, and he's just a Vader, so you're not scoring points on the objective. Right. So it became this really interesting thing where it was like sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's a punishment, but it makes you play Vader the way he's supposed to play.
Yeah.
You find your target and you go get rid of them. And then that gets him out of your deck, so you can reshuffle your deck and you refresh everything. We gave him the extra Force to make sure that he could always do something, because like you mentioned, you don't want Luke to go without Force. You don't want Vader to go without Force.
And this is one of those moments we were talking about where there's a couple groups that are saying, this is absurd, you can't do this, why are you even giving us this? And a couple people being like, this is perfect, ship it.
Ship it. And so do you want to talk about the tie-in to Obi-Wan, Luke, and everything, and bring that together?
Yeah, so the tie-in here is on you are unwise to lower your defenses. If you look at you are unwise to lower your defenses, and I will not fight you, and patience. They're all, when you're attacked, do this thing. And they're all written in the same way, and Vader's is very aggressive. It does a bunch of damage.
Not patience, so uncivilized.
Thank you, I'm sorry. So uncivilized.
Yeah.
So Vader's is super aggressive. Luke's lets him move and heal, and I'm forgetting what So Uncivilized does in this moment, but it's something similar.
It's the super deflect.
Super deflect. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Super deflect and riposte, right? You attack, or it's super deflect. You attack him, he deals 3 back.
Correct.
Which got replicated on the Vader, where he deals 3 to you. That kind of stuff.
And those little tie-ins, those are some of my favorite little Easter eggs, right? Connecting them together.
And we've got a couple more of those going. But I think in the end, right, where we wound up was we have flavors of Vader that are similar but different, right? Like if it's vanilla, if they're both vanilla ice cream, one has Snickers and Twix in it, and one has pecans and caramel.
Yeah, I kind of think of it like they're both mint chocolate chip, but one's the green one and one's the one that's just white ice cream.
Oh, that's super close.
Yeah.
I mean, one just has fake food dye in it.
No, they're completely different.
Different than that. I don't know. We'll get into this later. We'll talk later.
We'll
talk
see you in the Q&A panel after the rest of these.
And then I think the last thing that wound up on Vader, so that also kind of pushed him in a different direction, was perhaps I can find new ways to motivate them. That came out of conversations with the playtesters, and you added that later.
Yes.
To kind of give him a tie into the Galactic Empire more and let him
and
force things around.
And part of it came down to some testers were saying I had to activate him 3 times before he wounded anyone because I rolled terribly, and then he wounded someone, but it was over and it didn't really do anything else for me. So when he wounds something, we wanted to make something good happen, right? So that it's also that back and forth of like, you don't want Vader to wound things because he's going to get to move troops, and Vader really wants to wound things to move his troops.
Absolutely. Okay.
It's a shame we don't have the stance cards because I like the hidden Easter eggs and all the stance cards.
Well, we're
for
gonna
both Vader
show
and Luke.
some of the stance cards.
It's
We
coming.
got a stance card or two coming.
Yeah, they're coming.
They're coming.
That's exciting.
But I want to shift gears back and talk about how the idea of building this cohesive squads that are designed to work together out of the box, right? That a player can mix and match, but if you go in, you're going to get this canonical feel that's going to work really well on the tabletop. Let's take a look at how all of that translates through in the overall Luke squad with both Lando and R2 inside job and Boushh Leia, who we looked at earlier. So walk us through kind of the thought process, the design of this squad specifically, and how they play off of each other to make that experience happen.
So, like we talked about with Jedi Luke, his identity is kind of greedy. He doesn't really do anything for his buds. He's just Luke doing Luke things, which is rad. But part of the design concept of the squad packs is that this is a squad that works well together that you can just put on the table and make it happen. So Boushh and Lando and R2 had to gel. They have to do something together, and you can see that in Boush's tactic that moves a spy. Lando and R2 are spies. Great. So Boushh kind of became the piece that helps the supporting in this one, as opposed
The
to
linchpin a little bit?
Yeah, the linchpin, as it were.
Similar to how Rex, and talking about Easter eggs, similar to how Rex works with Anakin and the 501st and the Force set.
Yes, exactly. So, and then with Lando and R2, like, this one was interesting because originally Lando and R2 were separate and they were different things, and then we decided to put them together, and how do you do that? And then that helped us like kind of come up with how these multiple character units that are unique characters work. And this was a really interesting journey to go on, and a lot of conversations. And I really am proud of where it landed. I think it's a nice mix of feeling like R2 and also feeling like Lando. They move around a lot. Element of surprise kind of fit them both because, I mean, Lando's in disguise, and R2's just
serving
full of
drinks?
surprises.
Yeah.
That,
Well, they
like,
just assume he's just, he's just a bartender.
He's just an
rolling
astromech.
around.
Yeah, he's just
fine.
doing his thing. Forward planning had to be in here because of the scene on the barge. There's the barge flying.
I remember when
and
we were talking about making Bar 2D2, you were like, the only thing I need is for Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker lightsaber to pop out of his head.
Absolutely, yes.
You were so excited
And I was
about
like,
that.
it has to happen. He has to be able to shoot Luke his lightsaber. If Luke's disarmed, he has to be able to remove disarm. Most important thing to me. There it is. It's on the card. Forward planning, at the start of another character's activation, he can remove conditions from them. Cheers. So now if Luke gets disarmed, his buddy can help him out. And then if you look at his identity, I mean, he can be immune to expose, he can be immune to pin, so now you can get rid of disarm. He's
pretty
doing
good.
okay. Yeah,
Pretty
he's going to
good.
be fine.
It's not bad.
And then we have
Clever Disguise, I
Clever
thought
Disguise.
was really smart.
I like this one, yeah.
Where you can't target them with the range attacks until their card is out of the deck because they're in disguise.
Correct.
I thought that was brilliant. Like that
Yeah.
was, I've stolen it in other things as well.
Yeah, I thought that one was
see
really
more of that.
fun.
Yeah, you'll
and
see more of
super
that idea.
frustrating.
But I
Yes.
was just like, oh, it's so good. All right. And then I was working on we work on other characters who were spies or like hidden, and it's just like, you already had a great idea. I'm just gonna use that.
And so what's really cool, like the first time I got to play this, like once it kind of settled and it's doing everything it's supposed to do, I drew Leia, and Leia moved Lando and Luke and then did her thing, and then a couple turns later Luke showed up and just started wrecking things. I was like, oh, it's the movie. This is good.
This is great.
Yeah, it was great.
This is perfect. All right, so shifting away from that squad pack, let's take a look at, we talked about Vader. Let's talk about R2.
Yeah, let's do it.
So in the Yub-Nub pack, we get a new version of R2 who is on the same base as C-3PO. So
Yes.
C-3PO and R2-D2 kind of representing the Golden God, them working together with the Ewoks. I thought this one was really fun because, again, you talked about Lando, R2 being separate, but then kind of coming up with how they work together to function like a normal supporting unit. Here, we got to do two very different characters. Like, it's two supporting characters in one.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. So go ahead and just talk us through this.
Yeah, so obviously C-3PO and the Ewoks is awesome. I love all
Gotta
those
do
scenes,
it,
love all
right?
that stuff that's happening. You have to put that in the game. But we talked about yesterday in Shatterpoint, The combat tells the story. C-3PO does not fight.
Not really. No.
It is, as you can see on the stance card, it is literally against his programming. That is not a thing he does. So we needed to find a way to put him into the struggle and let combat tell something. And the best way to do that is to put him with his best friend R2-D2, because R2-D2 is here to fight.
He angry trills.
Yeah,
He angry
yeah,
trills.
as you can tell from Angry Trilling, which probably my favorite stance name to date. If you look at the abilities, they're kind of a split between C-3PO stuff and R2-D2 stuff. So Brilliant Oration, C-3PO rule. R2, I'm not sure that's such a good idea. Kind of a C-3PO
R2
idea,
doing stuff.
but it's R2
He's
doing stuff.
doing stuff.
And that came directly from me watching the clip where R2 starts cutting the net after they're all caught by the Wookiees.
They
Just,
just
I don't think
fall.
that's so they get to remove some conditions, take some damage for doing so, and then they got this fun ability that has
falling
to
out
do,
of the net was him taking the damage.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yep. Divine Influence. So C-3PO is the Ewok's golden god. This one was fun because this is where we decided that we were going to give a flipping stance card to this secondary unit, and it's the first one that has that. And we had done Lando and R2, and they share a stance card. Spoilers, but here we decided let's make it flip. Let's do something interesting here. And so you've got Angry Trilling, which is R2 slapping things, and then you have C-3PO's Against My Programming, and it's like all heals, and he can use his active. He does some damage at the end by accident.
To me, that's like him falling over and tripping somebody or something.
It's just a little bit of luck.
But the idea is like this is a very strong support piece secondary. It helps the Ewoks out a lot, and it gives you the option to be on the C-3PO side and kind of bolster your forces, or you can be on the R2 side and try and throw out some damage where you need to. And then, of course, there's Goodness Gracious Me, which helps out all your Ewok buds. That's the last supporting piece. But again, it was just like the journey of making sure that we got the big moments in. And let me tell you, it's really hard to find good lines of text from the film for R2-D2.
None of it really works.
Yeah, you can't spell those things.
Just beeps.
So
Just beeps and boops.
This one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like how we talked a little bit in the roadmap how General Leia in the Ichi Weemon pack, which I've confirmed is Ewok for WoW.
Okay, great.
Ewok for WoW, Ichi Weemon. How she is like she's a tie. She's a focal point for taking Ewoks and Rebel Alliance.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of that with the C-3PO and R2-D2 as well. Not as much as her, but you can kind of use them for the mixed amounts, and it makes up for, in some ways, if you don't take one of the Ewok primaries.
Yeah.
Because you want to do that kind of like combined arms Ewoks and Rebel Alliance together. So
and there are many
neat.
Conversations about, do I take C-3PO R2-D2 or Paplu or Wicket? Because they're all very different, and they all do things.
They all bring their own spice to the stew. All right, so last but not least, let's go ahead and show Luke Skywalker's stance cards and just talk a little bit about some of those Easter eggs. So Pagani, if you want to give the Easter egg for people.
So Form 5 Jim So, the shape of it is the same as Vader or Anakin's. And then Form 3 Soresu is the same shape as Obi-Wan's, because that's where...
Incorrect.
I'm sorry, sir, please.
It's okay.
Take it over.
The Form 3 Soresu is actually the same shape as Padme Amidala's Faith and Diplomacy.
Yes.
The idea being, while I was working on this, I read a post on Reddit where someone was talking about how, Leia is Anakin's daughter and Luke is Padme's son.
Yep.
And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. We could do that. But he's also Anakin's son, as we see when Vader threatens Leia in that duel, and Luke just starts screaming. And that's when you know
he was going a little
you
Leroy
messed up.
Jenkins at that point.
That is correct. And then you can see the Form 5 Genso is devastating, whereas
it's
Form
slightly
3,
it's slightly less damage than Anakin's.
yes, and it doesn't have the crits in the expertise, because when Luke
trained.
fights
Right?
that way, Luke is not as centered in his rage as Vader is. His when he just starts swinging, you've seen this scene, he just starts swinging until Vader's hand is gone. That is not a practiced swing. Whereas in his more metered defensive, the fighting that he actually learned
Yeah.
from Obi-Wan.
He gets all the crits. He's
He
more
gets all the
consistent.
crits. He's more consistent, but he doesn't do as much damage.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really like what's there, and bringing those ties together, right? As you look at the different characters, as you see more and more snapshots, being able to tie those things together, watch, and to get that again, it goes back to the fact that Shatterpoint is really about combat. It's about the narrative of the combat and how it tells a Star Wars story. It's fun to be able to do those touch points.
Yeah.
I loved when you were like, no, it's Padme's tree, and I was like, oh, yes, it is. It is, because
Just push your glasses.
My big nerd.
probably no surprise is that that Form 5 GMSO has been consistent. That tree style has been consistent on all the Vaders as well, because
Yes.
it is Anakin's fighting style, or at least his way of expressing that form of combat. So it's fun to see those two paired next to each other and be like, oh, they look very similar, but they do slightly different things. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we have covered all of our stuff to discuss. Hopefully, this has been illuminating for you, and you have some new things to think about as you start looking at more and more character reveals coming from our marketing team and everything else. Any last words, gentlemen, before we bounce? What are you laughing about, bounce?
We ride.
We
I
ride.
want to have fun.
True.
We're all allowed to have fun.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Be sure to stay tuned. We still have like half a day of mini extravaganza going on. I believe there's a hobby stream next from one Dallas Kemp. We will be back later with more great content. Take care. Enjoy your Saturday, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.